Hi guys, so this is my sixth attempt at recording this presentation or streaming it. Um, I do want to clear some things up real quick before I get into it. I didn't get striked or swatted or anything like that, and I do appreciate the support from you guys. Thank you. What my issue is I'm using an old MacBook Pro, and it just simply isn't capable of streaming, and for that matter, even recording on OBS most of the time, or even making a video. That's actually a huge reason why you don't see as much content from me, because every time I try to get my research out there, even through lower quality video, my computer can't handle it the vast majority of the time. So, and I hate doing this, but if there's by some miracle anybody out there that has some money that is willing to help me out with getting a new setup, it would be greatly appreciated. Just email me at northmattheww@gmail.com and maybe we can work something out. So with that out of the way, I want to get to the presentation here, and I'm going to start by playing this video. Shout out to Free the Captives. This is hilarious.
We sent you the citations. Hello.
Hey, Jan, how you doing? This is Jesse Spots. I'm recording this. Are you okay with that?
I'm recording you too.
Cool. It's been brought to my attention by people. You're currently working on a smear campaign going through my clips to paint me as a neo-Nazi. Is that correct?
We sent you the citations. Checking the citations. Why don't you just check the citations? Primary citations. Do you know how many of those citations ended up through that we checked? Check the citations. All you had to do was check the citations. Checking the citations to check citations like all you had to do was check our citations, you frickin' genius. Primary citations. To check the citations. All I said was we're going to check the citations. If you had a brain, you would have checked our citations. Why can't any of you deal with our citations? All you have to do if you got a brain cell in your head is check the citations. Primary citations. Primary citations. Primary citations. Citations. Check the citations. Check the citations.
Talk about the part
And the citations. Check the citations. Check the citations. Checking citations. Citations. We're checking the citations. I sent you the citations. Check the citations. Primary citations. Check citations. Dude, I debunked the stupid Talmudic doctrine, you idiot. Fact.
All right.
Cool.
All right.
It's been brought to my attention by people. You're currently working on a smear campaign going through my clips to paint me as a neo-Nazi.
Anyway, so there's that. And the reason why I played that is first off, that's a joke that Adam would always make, that Jan's always going, check the citations, and it's hilarious. And I'm not, this presentation isn't about dissecting the straw man argument that Jan and Lloyd present. And by the way, this Lloyd guy, I actually think is a Mossad asset. He just reeks of a Mossad asset. He does military-style martial arts training, and it just, the narrative that he's pushing, and he lives overseas. That guy is extremely suspect to me. Anyway, the narrative that they're pushing is essentially, just very condensed, is essentially because Islam is bad, and all the bad things associated with that religion, which, by the way, has been flushed out ad nauseum via the kosher-servative controlled opposition networks, where they paint Islam as the ultimate enemy of everything. Meanwhile, Islam doesn't really have any institutional power. I mean, you could point to like Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states, but who really operates them? Who put the House of Saud in power in Arabia? No, that would be the British Jews. Saudi Arabia is a gopher state. It always comes out that Saudi Arabia and Israel are working together behind the scenes, getting directives from Israel. That has come out. So Islam doesn't really have any institutional power. All roads lead back to Israel every time, especially when you're talking about the subversion and domination of the Western world. But as far as like dissecting the straw man argument that Jan presents, that because Islam is bad, and supposedly some Talmudic quotes have been debunked, uh, then we must worship the Jews and follow everything the Jews say, and they're our friends. Well, that goes back to Jan being a Mormon, and I'm going to get into that in a second. But as far as people who have completely dissect his argument, I would check out like Daniel at Activist News, who I recently got in contact with. Um, he does a really good job of dissecting how ridiculous the argument Jan is presenting really is. Um, and for that matter, you know, check out Sway, Handsome Truth. Uh, oh man, I'm forgetting people. Oh, Albert Bershai for sure. You know, I completely disavow the attack that Jan committed against Albert, attempting to have him censored. Guy does great work, great guy. So definitely check out his channel and show him a ton of support. Um, but yeah, you know, and the whole narrative that billionaires are funding our little genre here, our little group, you know, the GDL, whatever that is, you know, that's being funded by billionaires like Tom Steyer. That whole Halsey narrative just it just even adds to how ridiculous the arguments that Jan is presenting really are. You know, especially for people who know what the GDL is and were around the entire time and saw it run its course. You know, it's completely absurd. Here I am, and I don't even have a sufficient equipment. Meanwhile, supposedly we're all getting funding from billionaires. It's ridiculous. You know, I would love that. You know, if a billionaire wants to help me out, please. You know, if you appreciate my work. But you know, that's just simply not the case, and it just adds to how ridiculous the argument him and Lloyd are presenting truly is. So anyway, I just getting the Jan situation out of the way first and foremost. I'm wiping my hands clean of Logos Media and especially the direction he's currently going in. And it's frustrating to me because I do want to continue to cover some MK Ultra stuff, and I do think the research that he presented with the primary citations, you know, but there's legitimate facts to that, and he included the Jewish element of that, or the Zionist element of that, who was dictating that cultural agenda and everything that was going on there. You know, he included all that stuff, so he's essentially tainting his past research, which is very frustrating to me. Very frustrating to me. You know, so you know, Jan, I can't continue to support this, especially when you're censoring people who disagree with you. You know, if someone disagrees with you, they should have every right to give their opinion why and present evidence why and say that you're pushing a JDIF or a Zionist narrative. So how can you attempt to censor those people? You know, maybe you are, and I think you are, and it's coming through the Mormon church that you're associated with. So for those of you who don't know, and I'm sure most of you do at this point, Jan is indeed a Mormon. And that is the reason, in my opinion, that he's going in this direction, and it's being dictated through the Mormon Church. And that's what the rest of this presentation is going to be about, is Jewish and Mormon relations and how deeply intertwined the Mormons are with the Zionist hidden hand. I never looked at Mormonism as an important piece of the puzzle, other than their association with the John Birch Society and these kosher conservative conspiracy networks that have been in place since the 50s, which we'll get into later on as well. The fact that they were deeply intertwined with them was always suspicious to me, but I never really looked past that, and I didn't know much about the church. But then I started looking, and it was just it blew my mind as soon as I saw how deeply intertwined the Mormons are with the Jews, and the fact that these Mormons who believe in Jesus absolutely worship essentially a Jewish ruling class and do whatever they say. You know, I mean, it's unbelievable to me that they just follow these people who have no respect for Jesus, because the Mormons think they're going to get a seat at the table. They look at themselves as essentially Jews. And we're going to get into that. But first, I want to play this clip from my initial live stream, you know, where I got 20 minutes of it out before my computer almost caught on fire. This is addressing the Ashton Birdie situation. Now, if you heard this, and believe me, this ties in with the rest of it. If you've already heard this, I'm sure a couple of you had, because I played it a couple times now. Just skip through it. But I'm going to add to it at the end. So let's give this a listen real quick. All right, hey guys. So I wanted to address the Jan situation. He's going. Are you following the narrative he's pushing? My opinion on why he's going in that direction, and really baked Alaska and Ashton Birdie why he's going in that cause of it is. Um, but initially, I wanted to talk about the whole baked Alaska and Ashton Birdie situation, and believe me, it ties in to the rest of my stream. I know everybody's commented on this, and this is weeks ago, but I felt obligated to at least give my opinion on what happened there, particularly because I actually liked the direction Ashton was going at the end of last year, early this year, where she started saying that the Republicans are the swamp as well. Blindly following Trump isn't the solution. That's going to get you nowhere. And I also didn't like how people reacted to the situation. If you pay attention to that community, which I have for years, that CX community, the two people that were interacting with them are known as leeches, and that's what they were doing. And they were completely shitting all over Baked Alaska the entire time, leeching off him and just gaslighting him. And who knows where the donation came from. If she did it, there's another level to it. But I honestly don't think she did it. And essentially, she was just standing up for her boyfriend, who needed to stand up for himself. So it just the way people were calling her crazy, the way she reacted with the knife and cutting herself, that was for attention. That is crazy. And hopefully, the public embarrassment that she received following that situation allows her to evolve as a person. And honestly, I look forward to future content from her. I think she's going in the right direction. But that's not my main takeaway. The drama isn't my main takeaway from what happened there. This was my main takeaway, and I think almost everybody missed this.
No. When I swear on the Bible,
Did you leave it up?
dude.
Yeah, I left it on the
I'm a
counter.
Mormon. When I swear on the Bible, I mean it.
Okay.
Did you donate?
Okay, so she says she is a Mormon. She is a Mormon. Okay, so just building on that, like I said, I think Ashton was truly going in the right direction. And by the way, Ashton, this community here is with open arms. If anybody has access or saved that D-Live stream she did with Baked Alaska while they were at the sushi place, she made a statement without mentioning him by name because of the non-disclosure agreement that Alex Jones makes his employees sign. But she outed him without saying his name. That she was offered, I believe it was $6,000. It was thousands of dollars. I'm pretty sure it was $6,000. For her to make a video on Black Panther to her 200,000 subs. $6,000. I want that just to sit in your brain for a little bit and just think about that. Why would you pay someone $6,000 to make a video about Black Panther? Seriously, think about that. And then think about how these networks operate and how people just pick up on these narratives and continue to push them. And the vast majority of them aren't getting paid. Okay? So all it takes is them to offer, a person like Ashton Birdie, and she makes a video about Black Panther, and then all of a sudden it spreads to all the people who just regurgitate the information. And furthermore, just if she were a Mormon, think about this. Now, like I said, this that could absolutely be a joke. It could be a joke. But they were in Mormon territory there in Queen Creek, Arizona. There's a big Mormon presence at UC Berkeley where she went to college. So I don't think it's unlikely that she was a Mormon or is associated with the Mormon Church. And I want you to think about that. That is probably the reason she was raised to the level of prominence that she was. And it's also interesting seeing a girl like her, and the image that was painted about her is so different, and the image that was packaged and branded of who she was is so different than who she truly is as a person. And people just perceive what that image is. It's just very interesting to me. And I'm not being a white knight here. I'm not. I really do. I think she's sharp. I really like the direction she was going, and we need more people like her, especially insiders who understand how these networks operate, to come out and speak out about it and really say that this left-right game is a perversion of the republic. It's like what John Adams said, and I'm paraphrasing here, that the thing he fears most is a two-party system dominating the republic. That's really the only thing that can go wrong. I mean, this left-right game is truly a perversion of the republic. And then you have these controlled opposition assets like Mormons, the ultimate Christian Zionists in place, who are coming at it from a good heart because they're brainwashed by their religion to bow down to their Jewish authority. So they're coming at it from a good heart, but they'll never question Soviet Israel. Never question Soviet Israel just because they have that title that they're Jews or God's chosen people, which is what Mormons believe about themselves as well. And we're going to get into that. So initially I want to start off here by talking about Judaism and Mormonism. Mormons regard Jews as a coveted people of God and hold them in high esteem. Studies have shown that American Jews generally view Mormons more positively than any other religious group. Okay? Jews view Mormons more positively than any other religious group, despite often voting on opposite ends of the political spectrum. So the Mormons are typically conservatives, almost always very conservative. But the Jews still view them more positively. Why? Because the Mormons are all about bowing down to the Jewish power structure or the Zionist power structure. I mean, so you can have the ultimate progressive Jewish groups, and Mormons will still bow down to them no matter what and respect them and be dictated by them, essentially, just because they have that Jewish title of God's chosen people. They truly are the ultimate Christian Zionists. And as we'll get into later, and I kind of hinted at it with Ashton there, just the association with Mormons. And this is one of the first things that clicked with me, that there's something more to this Mormonism thing. The association with Mormons and these kosher-conservative controlled opposition networks where they never ask the JQ. They completely gatekeep that. The association with the amount of Mormons that are in these networks. Then I was like, maybe there's something more to this. And as we're seeing here, it is deeply intertwined with the Zionist power structure. Mormonism and Freemasonry, this isn't what I'm going to focus on today. I'm just mainly focusing on the Jewish relations. But you could do a whole show about how deeply intertwined Mormonism and Freemasonry are and how similar they are. And then also, I'm sure as many of you know, the amount of Freemasons that are also in these kosher, conservative, controlled opposition groups. Okay? So, Jews and Mormons quietly forging a path. Interesting. Jewish-Mormon relations are apparently humming along out of public view. A low-key initiative has brought together leaders of the Mormon Church and representatives of several Jewish organizations recently marked a decade of cooperation with a series of meetings at the Mormon Church headquarters in Salt Lake City. Cooperation. Key word, cooperating with the Zionist power structure. And if you're, as many of you know, Mormons in that church, and I'm not saying all Mormons are bad, but Mormons are all about submitting to what their church tells them to do. And the higher-ups of their church are all about worshiping Israel. So the church says, nope, you worship Israel. You go along with what they tell you to do. The Mormons are just going to follow. That's why they're the perfect tools. I mean, they truly are a perfect tools and a perfect kind of buffer, between the Zionist hidden hand, especially through a conservative conspiracy culture type of umbrella structure. The program, which included leaders of the New York Board of Rabbis and the American Jewish Committee, AJC, was organized in cooperation with Robert Abrams, a former New York State Attorney General, who has served as the Mormons' liaison to the Jewish community. The Mormon Church last week announced the Utah activities, which follow joint programs here in Israel over the last 2 years. In a press release that called the visit, quote, part of an ongoing series of relationship-building experiences and meetings. It was a natural decision. It was a natural decision to cooperate with them. The church has enormous respect for the Jewish community and for the state of Israel. How can you have respect for Soviet Israel? All those prime ministers, every Israeli prime minister is a Soviet? born in the Soviet Union or born to parents from the Soviet Union. Israel is the back door into the West, a subversive Eastern country that is the ultimate back door into the West that all roads lead back to, as far as politics, as far as entertainment, school, just everything. Literally everything. There's a paper trail that leads back to Soviet Israel and dual loyalty. You can't ignore that. The only way you can ignore that is if your religion tells you to. And they think they're going to get a seat at the table. Nope. Anybody who believes in Jesus is not going to get a seat in the table in Soviet Israel. Abrams, who invited Mormon leaders to Shabbat dinners in his Manhattan home, said participants in the programming may sponsor future joint humanitarian activities. So the humanitarian activities are a lot of times cover for intelligence activities, as we're going to get into later. Actually, I forgot to mention this, and then I'll get back to the Jewish thing. I completely forgot the intelligence thing brought this back up to me. Big shout out to Steve Outram, who Jan thinks is this guy that is funding these networks that run trolls against him. I think Jan burned those bridges himself, and I later found out that Steve has shared my work quite a bit, as well as added quite a bit to it, so big shout out to Steve Outram. He's done a lot of good work as far as dissecting Jan and a lot of the straw man arguments and ridiculous narratives that he's pushing on his website here, burners.me. So I would check this out. Jan denying the dancing Israelis, basically worshiping Israel. It's a very, very scary turn of direction. So definitely a big shout out to Steve Outram. Check his website out, burners.me, and there's all kinds of good content on here. But and this is a archive claiming that he is a possible FBI informant, and that's really not outside the realm of possibility. It's actually very likely, given how the Mormon Church is so closely intertwined, not only with the Zionist hidden hand, but also with the intelligence agencies. Right? And what another perfect buffer where you can fill these intelligence agencies with these Mormons who are all about worshiping Israel, but they appear to be white Christians, right? I mean, it really is a perfect tool. And it's not a surprise to me that the Zionist hidden hand is using these Mormon assets. So what's this one here? What Jews can learn from Mormons? Under the leadership of Robert Abrams, so this is what we just talked about, working together. Yet there is no question that the leaders of Latter-day Saints Church feel a real kinship and respect towards the Jewish community. Church leaders took great pride in welcoming us to their headquarters. Great pride in it. You guys come on in and subvert our organization. Suck us dry. Chop us up and suck us dry. Just like you're trying to do to the Western world. Okay, so here's some good videos I pulled. There's about 3 of these that I want to play for you guys. So we'll just view these.
So let me turn to the topic at hand, faith at the forefront, Mormon-Jewish relations. Why this delegation? Why this interest? What has there been for us to talk about? I'm sure that in a moment you'll hear about one of the most sensitive and indeed tension-producing issues, the issue of posthumous baptism. But the fact is that there's also much else and much positive that brings us together.
If I were to choose a word that would sort of try to describe this newfound growing relationship, I think it would be promising, tentative, because it still deals with the issue of one religion that has as at the center Jesus, and another religion that does not accept his messiahship. And so
I mean, just look at that, right in the meeting. Nope, we don't accept Jesus, but you guys worship us. How does that follow to you guys? I don't understand how you can worship this class of people who has absolutely no respect for your Messiah, just because they have that title of Jew. I mean, it's just insanity to me.
that will always be there as a barrier, but it doesn't.
I mean, and just you can tell by his body language here. There's just no respect, absolutely no respect for these Mormons. You know, no respect. They're just going in there and running the show. Come on, guys.
Have to be an ultimate barrier because there are many other positive things that go along with having religious differences.
We both come from faiths where we believe, I don't know if we say we believe it, but
Gregory Smith, former pro-Israeli activist at Brigham Young, AIPAC representative. So the Mormon Church has AIPAC representatives. Think about that. The Mormon Church has AIPAC representatives. That's how deeply intertwined they are with this power structure. So anybody who's in accordance to the church is ultimately working against the interests of the Western world. Okay? It's really that simple. You know, and like I said, not all Mormons are bad. They're really good people. They're just deceived by the church's power structure because the church chooses to worship Soviet Israel.
But it happens where individuals make a difference, where certain individuals within the history of our people have stood up and really made a difference, whether it's David Ben-Gurion or
Excuse me? David Ben-Gurion? David Ben-Gurion. You have this Mormon leader, elder, whatever he is, AIPAC representative, saying David Ben-Gurion is a great guy and made a huge difference. David Ben-Gurion is quoted as saying, "I am a proud Bolshevik." Think about that. This is also the guy that says we're going to see a Eurasian landmass. Europe and Asia are going to be one landmass, which ties in with the Belt and Road Initiative, Israel, China, and Russia. And guess what? America is nowhere in the picture. So are the Mormons working towards the interests of the West and of America? I don't think so.
Brigham Young. I think that there's strong corollaries. And you can make the case today that outstanding activism is predicated on the notion that we as individuals can get involved in the political process or whichever process you desire and make a tangible difference.
There are certain similarities between our communities. There are similar numbers of Jews in the United States and also worldwide. We both are communities that have dealt with a history of persecution and having to find our way as minorities within a majority culture. And as well, I think there are certain commonalities in terms of a sense of serving the public good.
In dialogue between Catholics, Christian, Protestants, and Jews, you know, the issues of the teaching of contempt, the supersessionist idea where Christianity has become the new Israel and that the Jewish people have lost that context. That's not an issue that we have to worry about with the Mormons. They fully believe in the enduring relationship of Jews and God. That they are too a part of it, but
no matter what, they can be the most progressive. It doesn't matter. You know, they can be the most, subvertive, disgusting human, but they have that Jewish title, so the Mormons, no question. No question. We see this guy goes, well, we have issue with a lot of Catholics and Protestants where, we just have no respect for Jesus, and we're not upholding the Western values and trying to work with the benefit of the Western world, so they kind of don't have respect for us. But the Mormons, no matter what we do, they're going to be there for us, and they recognize us as God's chosen. Unbelievable.
There can be more than one covenant. I don't think that's an issue.
An unfortunate disagreement.
I mean, that's just deceptive. There can be more than one covenant. They're just being used as tools. I mean, it's plain to me, it's plain to you guys, right? I mean, it's so obvious.
Is already brought out over the question of the baptism of Jewish dead into the Mormon Church, especially cases of Holocaust victims.
I think that the church goes to great lengths to stop it and make sure it's not done, and to make sure that members aren't engaging in this. And they've been very explicit to the members that you cannot do this and that there are consequences involved with doing it.
Okay, so this just reminds me of Jan, the Mormon idea of coddling the Jews and bringing them back to Jesus. That's a Mormon idea that you must worship the Jews and do everything for them, and then they're going to come back to Jesus. No, it doesn't work that way. They're just going to use you as a tool and discard you at the end. And did you notice how he just cowers down and just, bows down to the Jews there when they say, nope, you can't baptize the dead Holocaust victims. Another Mormon idea to baptize them into Jesus. You're not allowed to do that, okay? No Jesus for the Jews. No, it's not going to happen. And then he goes, okay, sir. Yeah, no, absolutely not. There is repercussions for the Mormons who want to bring the Jews back to Jesus. I mean, It's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous concept. You know, the Mormons are just the perfect tool, the ultimate Christian Zionist.
Elie Wiesel, in February 12th, asked that Mitt Romney speak out on this issue. He has not done so. Would you like him to speak out on this issue?
I mean, he's running for president, and like was mentioned, Mormons don't always feel comfortable talking about their faith because of the
key point there. Mormons often don't feel comfortable talking about their faith, specifically Mormonism or Latter-day Saints. They'll say they're a Christian. That's as far as they'll go a lot of times. So I want you to ask yourself and really think about this. How many of these hardcore Christian Zionists, and by the way, the Mormons are all about rebuilding the Third Temple and the Noahide laws, which they believe are the Ten Commandments. They're all about, putting those in place. So was George H.W. Bush, but, who cares? So they'll refer to themselves as Christians. Ask yourself, how many of these hardcore Christian Zionists are really Mormons? The ultimate tool. The ultimate tool.
The negative reactions that we still get.
I think it would be good for Mitt Romney to talk about some of the things that the church believes. I can just think of some interesting situations where if he were to be elected president, will he take an oath on 3 different Bibles? Because there are 3 different covenantal relationships that Mormons believe in. It just popped into my head. But the reality is this. Look, the interest of the president is for the entire nation. The interest of the president is to uphold the Constitution, to make sure that our various, governmental levels.
Okay, so first there, he made fun of the fact that there's 3 Bibles in the Mormon religion. He thinks that's ridiculous, obviously by him laughing at it. Also, he's saying that the ultimate duty of the president is to uphold America's benefit. Nope. He understands that the ultimate duty of the modern president is all about upholding what Israel wants. In a Mormon, it really is a perfect tool, but it doesn't matter, left or right, atheist or Christian. They're never going to put a Jew in there because it's all about, the Judas goat type of concept where you have to have the face of the nation up there. You can't put a foreign guy, a Jewish guy up there, especially when they're being dictated by Israel behind the scenes, but a Mormon really would be a perfect tool for him.
All work together, but at the same time are separate and don't try to take over one from the other. And I think that's really what is most important, that as a nation where freedom is an inherited responsibility, that we need to worry about that much more than what the individual person believes in his church or in his synagogue or in his mosque.
All right, so there you have it. There you have it. Unreal, man. All right, moving on to the next one here. Just some more, when I first came across this stuff, I just was getting chills, It's like, I knew I stumbled onto something, when I started seeing all these relations. It's truly mind-blowing.
There's an old Jewish proverb that says, "He who finds a faithful friend finds a treasure." These are not mere words for Latter-day Saint and Jewish leaders who have spent the last decade cultivating strong relationships.
It's been thrilling, fulfilling to be able to see this continuous stream of contact between our 2 communities and to understand how we're members of different faith communities, but there's so much that binds us together. We're so similar in so many ways.
The latest effort, a delegation of 10 Jewish leaders from New York and Los Angeles who came to Salt Lake City to learn about the doctrine and humanitarian efforts of the church. They visited Welfare Square,
AKA learn how they can use the church as a tool for their ultimate benefit and global domination, ruling from Jerusalem. The real New World Order agenda. Ruling from Jerusalem. How can we use all these different groups to our benefit? That's why they're coming there. They're not coming there to learn about Mormonism because they want to convert to Latter-day Saints. They're coming there to figure out how they can use them for their benefit.
Humanitarian Center and the Bishop's Central Storehouse, where they saw firsthand how the church helps people in need.
And okay, the Mormon Church does do a lot of good humanitarian things. They definitely do a lot of good. There's no doubt about that. But at the same time, there's a deeper layer to a lot of these humanitarian missions and just missions in general, where there's a lot of intelligence work going on as well, as we'll get into later.
This delegation is unique because it also includes the next generation of Jewish leaders, those who will carry the friendships between the faiths into the future. Leaders like Saba Samak.
It is so important to learn about other faiths. I think especially in the time that we're living in today, where there is so much misunderstanding and so much animosity, it is so important to really truly understand what people believe, how it's not a threat to you, and how you could work together to better yourself, to better this community, and to better America and the world.
The relationship between Mormons and Jews is a reciprocal one. Last October, the New York Board of Rabbis hosted a reception for members of both faiths to get to know each other. And in October 2016, a joint delegation of Latter-day Saint leaders and Jewish dignitaries gathered at a historic site in Jerusalem.
These are the ones who have
in Salt Lake City, the delegation spoke with Elder D. Todd Christofferson of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles and Sister Jean B. Bingham, General Relief Society President.
I think particularly the Jewish people know who they are, and so do we. When we find that out, there's just this easy bond that's created when we're looking for the good in others.
And looking for the good in others, Elder Christofferson says, is not limited to organizations.
It's always one-on-one. It's always individual relationships. If they do it locally, if they're in their neighborhood and they reach out and they...
I'm sorry, I just have to point out, look how fake this guy is. With his veneers. Does this guy not just seem dirty to you? Does he not seem like there's a lot more going on with him? Is it really about the faith for him, or is there more going on here?
Invite people over, and they take advantage of the opportunities that are quite naturally there. That's what we're looking for.
The highlight of this visit was a tour of the newly renovated Jordan River Temple, led by Elder Quentin Cook of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles.
To go through this temple today and to see so many of the Jewish Old Testament themes found in this temple and memorialized in this temple, it just reaffirms the connection between the two people.
Okay, so there's that. So yeah, we got that going on. And then there's one more I want to play here. Now, a lot of times you'll have Mormons tell you that Mormonism is all about the Torah. Now, there's a lot of supremacist views in the Torah as well. A lot of supremacist views in that as well. But okay, that it's all about the Torah, and it has nothing to do with Jewish mysticism, and it has nothing to do with Freemasonry. Well, that's just simply not true. As this young Jewish gentleman here is going to explain to you guys, I'm just going to play a little bit of this. It's a 38-minute presentation that he does with the correlations between the Zohar, the Kabbalah, and Mormonism. I'm just going to play a segment of it here. I would suggest you listen to this yourself. But let's listen to what this Jewish guy has to say about the relations between Mormons and Kabbalah.
Texts are translated into Latin in the Renaissance, and then translations into English happen in the early modern period. So now some of the basic theological claims in Mormonism that I think bear affinities to Kabbalistic ideas. One is the notion of priesthood and the ordinances thereof. So the idea of the Aaronic priesthood, or priesthood of Aaron, the priesthood of Melchizedek, and the priesthood of Enoch. These sort of three levels of priesthood and the emphasis on religious ritual having an impact on the divine realm and having in response to that, an impact in the cosmic realm. For Kabbalists, Jews maintain the fabric of being itself. They maintain the universe through their religious practices. There are affinities between that and Mormon notions of priesthood ordinances. The divinity of the soul and its connection to God. Obviously, that's not a uniquely Kabbalistic idea, but it's one that emerges in Mormonism in ways that are evocative of Kabbalistic ideas. Also, notions of three levels in the divine world and in the afterlife, the celestial, terrestrial, and telestial. In Mormonism, there's a three-level notion of the divine realm as well, operative in Kabbalah. The sanctity of marriage and procreation as a sacred duty connected to the divine realm. This is something we find emphasized in a really pronounced way in Mormonism and in Kabbalah. Ongoing revelation and the utility of truth in altered forms in other places. Kabbalists also regarded themselves as having access to divine revelation. And Kabbalists in some of their books are referred to as being a Navi, a prophet. And despite the fact that in more conservative sectors of the rabbinic tradition, prophecy...
Now, there are Mormons out there who think they're prophets. That's all I'm going to say.
...is said to end with the end of biblical revelation. Kabbalists are not afraid to use the term prophet in reference to themselves. The notion of a bond between matter and spirit, emanating from the connection of everything to God, and thus the value of the practice of law and ritual, this is something we find in both traditions. As, of course, the theurgic principle, the notion of things above and things below, reflecting one another, paralleling one another, and impacting one another. These are discourses between Mormonism and Kabbalism that raise the question of what kind of historical lines of influence there could be between these two traditions. So now, of course, if the Book of Mormon was an uncovering of ancient secrets, it reminds you of the Zohar. But in what way could Joseph Smith had access?
Okay, so he gets into how he gets into how Joseph Smith could have possibly had access to it, and how it was readily available to him during his time period through a German translator who wrote a anti-Semitic book about how Kabbalah is not in accordance with the Christian doctrine, therefore it's anti-Semitic, and he did such a good job translating it that Jews later used it for their own benefit to spread Kabbalah, in in those languages. So, I suggest, just for time's sake, watch this whole thing. He really gets into some interesting connections. And at the same time, there's also books out there. Behold the Tree of Life, a rabbinic approach to the Book of Mormon. Okay? And just ask yourself, if the Jewish power structure loves a church this much, what are they doing for them? There's got to be some major benefits to them. Just ask yourself, why would the Israeli Zionist power structure love this church this much? Okay, so moving on into controlled oppositions in Mormonism. Okay, big shout out to Jesse. We talked about this after my initial live stream cut off, and I totally forgot. And he reminded me that Glenn Beck is a Mormon, and his career is very interesting, in his career arc here. So let's read a little bit of this. Glenn Beck is arguably one of the most influential Mormons in the media today. Broadcast on more than 400 stations, his nationally syndicated radio talk show is the third most popular in the United States, and his afternoon television show on the Blaze Internet TV network has millions of viewers tuning in to hear what he has to say. But before Glenn joined the Mormon Church in 1999, his career and his personal life were in ruins. Wasn't successful up until that point. Sweet success. For 2 years prior to his baptism, Glenn had desperately searched for an agent to represent him, but to no avail. Quote, I had destroyed my career, he explains. Quote, then, the day after I was baptized, the phone rang. It was the #1 agent in New York. I wonder what tribe that agent was part of. I just wonder, you know. He said, I hear you're looking for someone to represent you. You've got a lot of baggage, but I hear you're trying to change. I need to do some homework and I'll call you back. 3 days after his baptism, Glenn was offered, 3 days after his baptism into the Mormon Church, Glenn was offered his first radio talk show at a station in Tampa, Florida, also home to Special Operations Command. Just interesting parallel. He inherited 18th place in the ratings, but within a year, he inherited the 18th place. Within a year, Glenn had given the radio station its first #1 program. His show was nationally syndicated, and in 2002, it is now heard on more than 400 stations. In May 2006, Glenn's television show debuted on CNN. In 2009, he moved to Fox. And in 2011, he moved his program to the Blaze Network, which he created. The Blaze Network. Now, let's look into the Blaze Network a little bit. The Blaze Network. I'm sure many of you know about this. Now, this is one of the massive controlled opposition networks. You know, a Mormon media empire. Mormon so a paid television network founded by Glenn Beck and Mark Levin, who, you know, I wonder, man, is he a Mormon? What is, you know, what's his ethnicity or what's his tribe? Oh, he's Jewish. Oh, okay, so you got a Mormon and a Jew running this massive controlled opposition media empire, you know? I mean, it's just, it's the ultimate tool. It's the ultimate tool of the Zionist power structure. It really is, and it didn't click until Jan went in the direction he went in. Then I started digging into what the church is a little bit. Right, and by the way, he was trying to send Mormons to my house. He wanted me to join the church. And I seriously considered it for a second because I didn't know anything about the church, you know? But once he started going in the direction he started going with Lloyd, and he was trying to force me on camera real quick, and I didn't know anything about what he was talking about. And then I figured out what he was talking about, and it's like, oh, I see what's going on here, you know? I mean, so let's go here. The Blaze TV. I mean, let's look at some of these people associated. Stu Bridges, Glenn Beck, Steven Crowder, who is just an ultimate Christian Zionist shill. And he's someone that needs to be gone after more. You know, he's got like 1 million+ subscribers. He's got a ton of influence. People just leave him alone, especially now that he's associated with this massive Mormon Jewish media empire. They just work, man. They fit like a glove. They just work hand in hand so perfectly. So perfectly. I mean, the Mormons really are the ultimate tool for a conspiracy culture because they're into that anyway. They've always been into that conspiracy type of thinking. So, you know, and then especially if they're willing to worship Soviet Israel, wheel them out there. Just say they're Christians. You know, these are just white Christians. No, they're Mormons. You know, Gavin McGinnis, Ben Shapiro, Dennis Prager, Rand Paul, Bill O'Reilly, Ted Cruz, you know, also associated with our guests that we're going to talk about here in a second. Tommy Lauren, you know, the list goes on. I mean, you can go through all these. They're all Christian Zionist shills. You know, what else is Glenn associated with? News host Glenn Beck's affection for the John Birch Society. As exemplified by his peddling a book by an anti-communist activist, Cleon Skousen, who was a member of the John Birch Society. Guess what? Cleon was also a Mormon. Like I said, that was my initial piece of the puzzle when I really started thinking about it. I remembered how many Mormons were associated with the umbrella structure of the John Birch Society and CMP Network. Now, I've done a ton of work on this, but who am I typically talking about? Well, our favorite radio talk show host, Alex Jones. And I got a nice little clip to play of Alex here. Let me just make sure I got the right timestamp here. Okay. Let's listen to what Alex has to say here. Deeply associated with the John Birch Society. I mean, go back and look to some of my previous research on him. Let me just, okay.
I just, let's say this, the Mormons know how to see something before it appears. Because I never saw conspiracies or anything when I was early on, but I noticed early on a lot of my sponsors weren't Jewish or Vatican, like everybody said. No one's ever said this. It was actually Mormons But I guess, like, I'm anti-globalist, want us to be prepared. You know, they're big in the Constitution. It was Mormons. I'm not a Mormon. Don't have any family that's Mormon other than, I guess, my cousin's mother's sister. She's Mormon out in Salt Lake City. It's just all I can be is honest about this. And I just... It's a crazy thing, and I haven't ever been to a Mormon church. I haven't ever been to one of their temples. I haven't been behind a veil, so I don't know what goes on there, even though I know everything. Because
I mean, did you catch that last part? I've never been behind the veil, but I don't know what goes on there, but I know everything. I'm sure he does. You know, I'm really sure he does. And think about that. Initially, he was shilling for Israel. You know, and and this is a perfect buffer. You know, especially for somebody who's a useful idiot initially, like Jones, where they can just send the Mormon church in to give them sponsors. Go, hey, we're into the conspiracy culture. And, you know, Jones doesn't know anything about Mormon-Israeli relations. So then they just start shoveling him money, and it's just a conduit, you know, through the Mormon church. Israel, Mormon church, Jones, Israeli propaganda. You know, the classic John Birch Society, kosher conspiracy propaganda. And like I was saying, the rampantness of Mormons within the John Birch Society. Cleon Skousen, the book that Glenn Beck was pushing here, well, Willard Cleon Skousen is a Mormon, also a member of the John Birch Society. And I just want to quickly go over some of the things he's done here. Lee told a friend that Skousen was one of, quote, the greatest spenders of public funds anybody who's ever served in any capacity in the Salt Lake City government, and, quote, a master of half-truths. John Birch Society and a Mormon peddling half-truths. What a surprise. What a shock. You know? And just understanding the history of the John Birch Society. It's like, you know, like when I was talking to Caitlin Bennett in Grand Rapids. I brought up Sheldon Adelson to her. I brought up Soviet Israel to her. I brought all that stuff up to her. And they knew who Adam Green was. Her security guy, you know, just a good old Southern boy, you know, we hate Adam Green. I was like, oh, so you guys know about the work, you know, you know, I was bringing it up. I was like, how can you just ignore this stuff, Caitlin? How do you just ignore this stuff? And she goes, well, I just don't really care. This is just a job for me. It's just a job for me, you know, and she got uncomfortable when I brought that stuff up. You know, and then I started bringing up the history. It's like, I was like, do you understand the history? How long this kosher conspiracy network has been in place? Do you understand that since the 1950s, there was something called the John Birch Society, which was all about pushing kosher conspiracies, giving you half-truths, weaponizing truth. You know, a communist conspiracy, but we're going to stop when it gets to the Jewish part of it. You know, we're going to stop when it gets to the JQ. And there was people who recognized that back then even. Like, you know, you had Reverend P. Oliver and William Luther Pierce, who were members, you know, and they got disillusioned with it, right? They got disillusioned with it because they weren't getting to the Zionist power structure. They weren't getting to the JQ. So then they recognized, well, this is just a massive network of gatekeepers, you know, kosher conspiracy. This has been around since the 50s. This is the same framework. This is nothing new. It's a massive umbrella structure. And why did William Luther Pierce and Reverend P. Oliver, when they tried to start their own societies and councils, they went nowhere? They went nowhere. There's a reason why these networks are able to operate and tell you all kinds of different things. You know, but as long as you focus on the left-right game and never get to the JQ. And the Mormons are the perfect tool for it. By the way, Skousen, as we mentioned, is Joel Skousen appears on Alex Jones's show regularly. Regular guest on Alex Jones's show, and he gives you all kinds of interesting information, but he never gets to that JQ. And he also never mentions the fact that he is a Mormon, fellow Latter-day Saints member with Mitt Romney. Joel Skousen is the older brother of Mark Skousen, also a Mormon, and the younger brother of Royal Skousen, also a Mormon. The three Skousen brothers are the nephew of conservative author and commentator Cleon Skousen, who we just mentioned. Okay? So you see how these networks operate? They're filled with Mormons, absolutely filled with Mormons, who call themselves Christians. But you understand? You know, there's plenty of Catholics and everything else in here. Just quickly going over what the John Birch Society is here. This is my notes from a documentary I wanted to put together, but unfortunately my computer couldn't handle it, and it crashed every time, and I was never able to put that out. So I did release my notes, and I need to go back through and correct this. I think they're worth checking out because it just shows how deeply intertwined these kosher conspiracy networks are, especially with a president like Trump. And it gets into Jones and everything else. Just a wide spectrum of what these umbrella structures are. So excuse the grammatical errors. I should have fixed this a while ago, but I just wanted to release these. So I would say these are worth checking out. But just quickly to go over how important is, so this is talking about the Council for National Policy and the John Birch Society. And let me just read this one real quick. So the Council for National Policy reflects a slick, updated repackaging of the John Birch Society philosophy, as well as the John Birch Society as a paradigm or pattern of thought. Your pre-programmed subconscious, where your thought patterns are coming from. Your algorithmic thinking, 5% of your thought process is pulling from that predetermined stock. So as far as conspiracy cultures, you have Jones in place, who's pushing this JBS paradigm, JBS kosher conspiracies, and then all people have is they're able to pull from that stock, the classic John Birch Society narrative. And Jones pushed None Dare Call It a Conspiracy and all kinds of JBS material, and as a conduit for intelligence operations. Just as the Mormon Church is used as a conduit, so is the John Birch Society. It's interesting, and I get into some of that in this as well. The John Birch Society is the original framework. Like I said, these naive girls that get scooped up into this stuff, they don't understand, and guys as well, they don't understand that this is not grassroots, this is nothing new. This umbrella structure has been in place since the 50s to gatekeep, okay? The framework and secret society and the precursor to all this. So how important is it? Without understanding this umbrella structure of societies and councils, the Cato Institute, Council for National Policy, Heritage Foundation, John Birch Society, the list goes on and on and on. Or even recognizing its existence, and it's all a bunch of cross-contamination under this massive umbrella structure to gatekeep. Without recognizing it appears to be a network of real independent, quote, truth seekers. This is a key disconnect. This is the major key disconnect. That's why if you understand this history and you understand how long they've been running this scam for, you're able to work it out in your head that, oh, this is controlled opposition. These people really aren't independent. They're all part of this classic framework. This is a This is a network of Judeo-Christian Zionist pawns, or true believers, as CNP member Oliver North called them. So you have a couple real deceptive, nasty psychopaths in there operating all these good-hearted, a lot of times Mormon or Catholic or whatever, good-hearted people who are just deceived. And bona fide operatives, they provide a smokescreen of seemingly Christian white men, but are ultimately operated by the Jewish hidden hand. These are Zionist propagandists at their core. This is the origin and continuation of the conspiracy culture. You have to understand the history to understand the direction you're going, especially when they all tie back to this umbrella structure. You understand that you're just going to spin your wheels in the mud forever playing this left-right game, a perversion of the true republic, and you're going to get nowhere until Israel's dictating the world from Jerusalem, and you're all shoved into these little smart cities. Every single religious advocacy group you've ever heard of, and some you haven't, are listed to CNP. Every major think tank, from the Heritage to AEI to CNP to the Federalist Society, trace their roots back to the John Birch Society. So the CNP anointed Trump in 2015, Bush in 99. It's a face of a large network of groups and subgroups, ultimately tying back to the John Birch Society, controlling the opposition since the 1950s. Okay? And a lot of times you'll see mainstream say that the John Birch Society was anti-Semitic or anti-Mormon. Meanwhile, it was filled with Mormons, and meanwhile, it was filled with Jews, as by their own documents say. And just all you have to do is look at the kosher conspiracies that they were pushing. It's the same thing you hear on Alex Jones, literally, since the 50s. With updated, just in accordance with modern times. So again, in their documents, Jewish members, constantly Jewish members in the John Birch Society. They talk about how they love the John Birch Society, how it's good for America. Right. Controlled opposition is one of the worst things. That's why I focus on it so much, because so many people will not admit that they've been duped for a second time. They just won't do it. Why do so many Mormons back Trump? I wonder why. Okay, and then I want to wrap it up with this. Yeah, I'm going to leave it at this. There's one more thing I could go over here, just describing. But you should do that research on your own. Just look into the Mormon mafia within the intelligence agencies, okay? So this is a really interesting article. Why Mormons make great FBI recruits. Why Mormons make great FBI recruits. Remember this? Man, I really do think Steve's onto something here. You know, I'm honestly kind of scared of what Jan's going to do in retaliation. You know, I really don't think he's a horrible psychopathic person or anything like that. I think he's deceived by his church, which is being operated through Israel. And he might be an FBI informant at this point. And it certainly seems like they're running a smear campaign. Why Mormons make great FBI recruits. So I just highlighted some key points. I would read this whole article yourself. It's very interesting. Mormons have found an unusual degree of acceptance in agencies like Department of Homeland Security, FBI, and the CIA, which see Mormons as particularly desirable recruits, and have a reputation for hiring a disproportionate number of people who belong to the church. While this comes as a surprise to most people in Washington, and particularly among the people who work with or report on intelligence and law enforcement, it's common knowledge. I didn't know this until I started connecting the dots, and then it makes perfect sense why you would fill the intelligence agencies with these people who are loyal to Soviet Israel, when you understand that Soviet Israel and dual citizens dictate this country. It's really obvious. The disproportionate number of Mormons is usually chalked up to three factors. Mormon people often have strong foreign language skills from missions overseas, and a relatively easy time getting security clearance given their abstinence from drugs and a willingness to serve. This is a common theme. Their willingness to serve, or their willingness to submission. I want to see if I can find that in here real quick. If I can't find it, I'll just forget about it. But this is about a Mormon mafia group and how they all looked out for each other and how it's just rampant with Mormons. And in here he says, okay, further, this is why he recruits them, a Mormon recruiting other Mormons, and this is why they're perfect. Further, their religion includes strong drives for submission to authority. And ask yourself, what is that authority? Submission to authority, especially if it's the church and especially if it's a Jewish authority. I get why they want to hire them. You know, I get that mindset. If you're Soviet Israel, those are the perfect tools. You know, I keep saying that, but it's just, that's what they are. There have been Mormon FBI agents since early in the Bureau's history. Some accounts allege that J. Edgar Hoover had particular interest in recruiting Mormon agents. One well-known Mormon leader, J. Martell Byrd, served in Hoover's heyday from the 1940s through the end of the 1960s. And there's a famous story of a Mormon agent who in 1940, just 5 years after the modern FBI was born, from an earlier Bureau of Investigation, was tasked with supporting the agency's first double agent in Germany. So this goes way back. But it wasn't until the 1970s that outsiders started paying close attention and turning up connections between the prominent Mormons and the CIA, Watergate conspiracy, and other government activities. In 1975, report on the CIA, for instance, included the tidbit that one Mormon-owned PR firm made some overseas offices available as cover for agency employees operating abroad. So again, like the John Birch Society, being used as a conduit. I think I missed something here as far as Cleon here. And this gets... okay, forget about it. There's an example of the John Birch Society being... You can find that stuff on your own. John Birch Society being used as a conduit for intelligence operations. In my notes, I go over all that stuff. Operating abroad. And in the 1980s, a BYU professor told the authors of The Mormon Corporate Empire, a 1985 social science study on the church and its power, that, quote, "We've never had any trouble placing anyone who's applied to the CIA." Quote, "Every year they take almost anybody who applies," he said. It was around this time, too, that two cases put the Mormon members of the FBI dramatically into the public eye. In 1984, FBI agent Richard W. Miller was arrested, and he became the first FBI agent to ever be indicted for and eventually found guilty of spying for the Soviet Union. Now, when you understand that all the prime ministers in Israel's history are from the Soviet Union, and the fact that Israel is a backdoor into the West, and that, what did all those Soviet defectors say again? That Russia is going to fake its breakup until it takes over all of America's resources, and then they're going to come back stronger. Man, that's easy to do when you got a country like Israel, and you dupe all these Christians, who think that Jews are God's chosen people and that Jesus would be on their side. Man, that gets real easy to do, doesn't it? Doesn't it make sense why Mormons would be spying for the Soviet Union? Especially when it's a bunch of Jews running that government? Just saying. Miller wasn't the first Mormon to be in this position, though. Earlier in 1984, a Mormon who had worked in Army intelligence was arrested for passing secrets to the Soviets. Miller had been recruited at BYU, Brigham Young University. At his trial, testimony revealed a tangle of religion and work at the Los Angeles bureau where he had worked. One Mormon FBI agent said that he'd understood that Miller had been put under his command on a prestigious counterintelligence squad, quote, because our common religious background, and especially because your submission to Jewish authority. Another agent, Matt Perez, testified that Richard T. Bredzig, the head of the LA bureau and a Mormon bishop, had protected Miller and kept him from being fired. A Mormon bishop protecting a guy who's spying for the Soviet Union. Man, that's really dirty. Part of their complaint was that Mormon higher-ups had favored agents of their own religion. Quote, there was a Mormon mafia in the FBI and in the CIA as well. What is known is that agencies like CIA and FBI still recruit at Brigham Young University, looking for students with language skills and interest in public service. And then also, you can't forget, they like to put that language skill thing in there, but all kinds of people have language skills. I took German in school and Spanish and stuff. All kinds of people have language skills. But, it's not just Mormons, but the Mormons are really, really about submitting to the Jewish authority. Often, after a long career in the FBI, agents will join Latter-day Saints security department. Whew, guys. All right. So definitely show me some support after this, man. I hope I clarified it up as much as I could for you guys. I'm sure I missed a ton of stuff, but at least I'm getting this out here, and hopefully this will be premiering later today. So yeah, guys. Support everybody. Like I said, support Handsome Truth, support Sway, support Activist News, support Albert. And I'm missing a ton of people. Support Steve Outram. Support all these guys who are under attack under this smear campaign. And I'm expecting some retaliation from this, but I don't care. I owe this to you guys. I mean, I really do. I owe this to the world, to kind of clarify up, absurd narratives that are being pushed and just dismissing Soviet Israel as our friend. So anyway, guys, hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Have a good one.